Well, hello and welcome back to the Odds Now YouTube channel for episode 3 of our 6-part mini-series looking ahead to this summer's 2026 FIFA Football World Cup. It's me, Matt Hill, in the hosting chair alongside my regular partner, Felix Morson Pate. And over the last couple of episodes, I hope that you've enjoyed us setting the scene for this summer's tournament. We've already looked at the outright winner market. Last week, we did a bit of a deep dive on all of the 12 groups. Yes, 12 groups this time because we're up to 48 nations from 32. And that meant it was a bit more of a long-winded episode than we perhaps anticipated, but still really enjoyed diving into those 12 groups. And this week, we're going to be looking at another type of market that you can bet on at this summer's World Cup at the stage of elimination or to reach the whatever round you fancy for a particular nation. And Felix, these markets are quite good because even though they might look a little bit like a lottery, I think what we're going to do in the rest of this episode shows that with a bit of joined up thinking, you can actually see that there's some pretty clear angles here to take advantage of in these particular side markets.
I think so. It's the addition of the third place sides going through creates like this combinatorial hell that no one can negotiate through by hand. But if you've got a certain steer on how you think a group might go, and especially if you've got an inkling on a team finishing in third, and you know, regardless, they're going to play a group winner, you can definitely, play these things outright or Dutch a couple of selections, and there's definitely some nice prices to build accumulators with as well. So I think it can look daunting at first, but if you do sit down and just have a look at what you think is likely to happen, there's definitely some angles in.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree. And the way we decided to tackle this is we went away separately and we both had a crack at the Telegraph's World Cup predictor, which is basically shaping out, you pick your group winners, second, third and fourth, and that generates the knockout stages for you. And then you just go through for a bit of fun and pick eventually your winner. So we both went away and did this individually. And what we have already mentioned is that just getting one team slightly wrong, i.e., I think someone's going to finish second, Felix thinks they're going to finish third. It's like a sliding doors moment where the entire crux of the tournament changes based on that one selection. So even though we've got a lot of similarities in how we see these groups panning out, our knockout stage bracket looks very different. And what I think that has actually helped to illustrate is that there's certain parts of this knockout bracket that however the groups go, even for a bit of variety, there are some outcomes that look particularly likely, and they might be the ones that we want to focus our betting attention on in terms of these particular side markets. So I think the best way for me to do it is probably by just showing how we have the groups finishing, and anyone that watched last week's episode on the group stage will have a rough idea of what our thinking was here. But this was my attempt at predicting the groups. Nothing overly controversial there, I don't think. A lot of group favourites winning or whatever. I think in your mind, your conscious bias, you start to do this and you think, I haven't really gone for any upsets. I need to throw an upset or two in here. And that's maybe why I had Colombia finishing on top of Portugal. And I could have quite easily had Ecuador finishing ahead of Germany, Uruguay ahead of Spain. These kind of groups where it looks to be a one-game shootout between the big two, I think are very easy to flip-flop either way and make a solid case. But that was kind of how I had a feel for it in terms of my groups. Now, if I pull up Felix's, you'll see a lot of similarities here with the way he's done his group stage as well. Sorry, too many screenshots here. There's Felix's groups. Again, a lot of similarities with the likes of Mexico, Brazil, Belgium, Spain, Netherlands, etc., finishing top. Now, what we then had to do is pick which of the 8 third-place teams we thought would go through into the knockouts as well. Now, that's where it gets a little bit fiddly because you're trying to work out how many points each of these third-place teams are going to get, where that's going to leave them, factoring in goal difference. And, of course, you're kind of in the realms of guesswork at that point. However, we both did that. We got left with our knockout stages. And then we did our last 32 ties. You can see mine here. Into the round of 16 and quarters, semis, and the final. Now, I ended up with France versus Argentina. Funnily enough, Felix did the exact same thing and ended up with Spain versus Portugal. And between us, we've ended up with the top 4 in the betting market. So we haven't really made any groundbreaking revelations in doing that process. However, I think the interesting part of this process is the first set of knockout games, because if we actually pull Felix's back up and look at the teams you have going out at this last 32 stage, I think this is where the value is there to be exploited personally. There's some teams here that we've kind of got sneaking through in second or third that we don't overly rate. And I think between us, it doesn't really matter whether they finish second or third. We think they've got enough to get through a poor group, but we don't think they've got enough to go beyond the last 32. So I can already see that this stage of elimination, round of 32 market, is going to be one I'm probably going to be playing quite actively with certain sides. And Felix, I can see looking at your predictions that you have some teams very similar to me going out in the round of 32. You've got the likes of South Korea, the Ivory Coast, Norway, and I already know without pulling mine up that I'll have drawn similar conclusions here on some, Saudi Arabia there, Ivory Coast, Norway. So is it that simple, Felix? Like, do you think I can now start looking at these teams' stage of elimination markets, and if we both kind of concurred, do you think we're maybe onto something, or am I oversimplifying it?
I think there's definitely some wisdom in that. I think what you said is key about the third place sides, because you can't just like pick the best 8. You can see the 12 and then go, well, they're the 8 strongest, they're going to get through. I genuinely sat down and mentally played out all 6 games in each of my groups to try and do this. So you've got, like, I think Tunisia are by far a stronger side than Saudi Arabia, but I can see Tunisia drawing to Sweden, whereas I think Saudi Arabia will beat Cape Verde. And I think the history of these tournaments with third place teams going through is if you get a win, especially by a couple of goals, it's more or less enough to go through. You get the odd group where, like, was it the last years where 4 teams all finished on 4 points?
Yeah.
And it came down to goals scored. I can't see a group where that's going to happen at present in this tournament. I'm sure that will happen now. I've said that. But
I think the fact that there's 8 of the 12 going through basically means if you get 4 points, you're fine.
4 points
if
is
you get
100%.
3 points, the only way you're going out with 3 points is probably if you've got a horrendous goal difference. And I guess that would worry me slightly with Saudi Arabia, that they could get tonked off Spain and Uruguay.
Quite possibly.
But they're just so likely to get that 3 points against Cape Verde, you would think that it makes them very likely to make the round of 32. But I would be confident in saying whoever the Saudi Arabia play in the round of 32, they're highly unlikely to go any further.
Exactly.
And that makes them so attractive from the position of to be eliminated in the last 32. I'll put it back to you, mate. What teams that you had finishing third, and I'll get your screenshot back up here of your groups. But were there any of these teams that you had sort of going through in third that you just think they're not going to go any further?
The 3 for me would be Ivory Coast, Uzbekistan, and Panama. Because I've got all 3 of those like getting a decent win against the team finishing 4th and going through on 3 points and maybe like, I don't know, -1 goal difference or something.
Yeah.
But I just think they've looked out with the 3 teams that are below them. And if you look at who they play, they're all going to play strong group winners. I think I've got them going out to like England, Portugal, and someone else. So it's the addition of the extra 16 teams really highlights the disparity in that first knockout round. Sorry, who did I have? Oh yeah, Mexico, who've got that host nation advantage that we talked about last week. So yeah, I think it is a really good angle in, especially if you want to target that specific round rather than to reach. Because if you generally just can't see them getting past any of the big boys, but you can see them sneaking through, it's a great way. Whereas there's a couple that I think are more like wild cardy and are also in more open groups. So I look at Turkey. I've got them going out there to France. But as we said last week, that's a wide open group. I fancy Paraguay. You fancy the States. The other team in there, Australia, have got a decent World Cup record as well. So all it takes is for the jigsaw pieces to fall in a slightly different pattern. And Turkey could be presented with the knockout path that I've got Paraguay having, which is Bosnia and then Belgium. Now, that's suddenly a much more attractive route for Turkey. So I think playing your cards right and knowing when to play this exact stage of elimination and then maybe having a gamble on these higher variance teams to reach further and maybe having like a small stake on the round of 16 and a slightly smaller stake on the quarterfinals. I think that's a really attractive way for me to build an outright book in a World Cup like this.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there. So just to be clear, I'm going to bring it up on screen so that people can kind of appreciate the difference in these two markets. So for each individual nation on Oddschecker, you should, with a bit of digging, and there is a lot of markets to go through, I will warn you, you should be able to find stage of elimination market for each team, and then a to reach X round market, and they're two different markets, but with can be played in very different ways, as Felix eloquently explained there. So I'm bringing up the Ivory Coast here on screen just for a little bit of context here. We both are very strong on them getting through the group, just by virtue of the fact that they've got a relatively kind group stage game there. So they've got to play Curacao. Now, it's almost impossible to see them not getting 3 points there against Curacao. Will they get another point against Germany or Ecuador? Possibly not. But Ecuador, as we've said in making a case in previous weeks, they're not a high scoring team. They'll probably 1-0 you and be quite happy with that. So I see Ivory Coast going through in third. I'd be very, very confident of that. I think they'll have a decent goal difference from the Curacao game. However, I don't really see them causing any problems to anyone in the latter knockout rounds. I had them going out to the USA. Felix, I think you had them going out to Mexico. Was that right?
Yeah, so it's host advantage.
Both options of which the opponent of the Ivory Coast would have a home advantage. So I'd be very, very bullish on them going out in the last 32. Now, as you can see, going back to odds checker here, and I've just got to mess around with the screen. 10 to 11 here on the Ivory Coast to go out at the last 32. There is a bit of money coming for it with some other books as well, which doesn't surprise me at all. I just have this as by far the likeliest outcome. I do not have that at a 50% chance. That's what I see happening for the Ivory Coast. So instantly, that's the sort of selection that I'm wanting to include in my multiples. Now, to try and give you a little bit of a to see what the different ways that you can skin a cat here, like you could back them group qualification here. The price is going to be a lot shorter. So they're 2 to 9 to go through the group here, Ivory Coast, but 10 to 11 to get through the group and knocked out at the first knockout round. I think that disparity is way too big. So, instantly that 10 to 11 is a bet for me. I think other teams that came up on our list there as a similar proposition. Saudi Arabia would be another one for me because, again, they have the benefit of one game against an absolute minnow that they should win, probably enough to get them through the group. Do they see them causing problems in the knockout stages? No. As you can see, the prices are a little bit more attractive here because I guess a lot of the projections have them finishing on 3 points with a negative goal difference, and it might see them drop out. But equally, there could be some Dutching you could do here. I think that 13 to 8 is probably too big, to be honest. But other places have it, closer to even money. So you're getting a feel there for generally what the point that we're trying to make here is if you can map it out, and if you think the teams that are just too good to go out in the group stage, not good enough to compete in the knockouts, playing them to go out in the round of 32 could be a lucrative way into this World Cup, I think, in this particular side market. Felix, when you were doing your projections, was there any other teams that sort of stood out to you as teams you'd want to get on side for a deep run kind of thing?
Not specific teams, but like a general point I was going to make, and then we can maybe dive into the teams that fit this profile, is looking at the last 32 draw, because what you've got is some runner-ups are guaranteed to play each other. So if you want to go to the group stages, you've got the runners-up in Group A and B will definitely play each other. So there you go. I've got that South Korea-Canada game. Yeah. You've got the runners-up of K and L. So that would be Colombia, Croatia, but that could very easily end up being England and Portugal.
Of course, yeah.
You've got the runners-up in E and I. So if that's Ecuador, and that could be Germany, France, depending on if a freak result comes in. And then you have a D and G. And we've already said D is a very open group. G looks kind of open for second. Like I put Egypt there, but I'm not that confident.
Very open, I would say.
So I think it's those 4 like mini sections of the draw that I'd be looking to target for sides that could go on a deep run. Now, as I said last week, I have Paraguay as my nap of the group stage to win that Group D. I think I put it up at 4 to 1. But with it being so competitive, do I think they'll definitely win it? No, I just think there's slightly more than a 20% chance that they do it. Yeah. I can very easily see them slipping into second place, in which case they would play one of, very likely, Egypt, Iran, New Zealand. Again, that opens up the draw completely for them. So I think they would be one that I'd be looking to maybe Dutch in terms of a last 16 quarterfinal kind of approach. Same with the Canadians potentially, because I've got them finishing second to Switzerland. And again, they've got that home nation advantage. Neither of us really rate South Korea. So I think targeting those all runner-up ties rather than the group winner versus maybe a runner-up, maybe a third place team is definitely the way to go for me.
Yeah, I concur with that. I'm just having a look at the knockout odds for Paraguay because it's a team we're talking about a lot. I might as well bring them up on the screen for everybody to see. So, yeah, Paraguay round of 32 is where they're expected to exit according to the market. They're 11-8 best price to go out at the round of 32. Group stage exit is 11-5. Round of 16, i.e. to win one knockout match, is 4-1, and then it's 20-1 or bigger the rest. So if, like Felix, if you think this draw could open up for Paraguay and they may be a tad underrated, then Dutch in this particular market could be attractive as well. You know, having your kind of core bet on the 4-1 and then just spreading a little bit of stake on the 20 and the 50 might be a nice way to go. And then if that draw opens up suddenly, you're on a real winner there. Like I think as well, when we do this bracket, it does just show that the top nations, ultimately, we know that there's going to be shocks at some stage, but it's very hard to sort of premeditate where them shocks are going to be because you don't really know the route of a nation and how it's going to open up for them. We've seen in previous tournaments with England, particularly during the Gareth Southgate era, where teams getting knocked out and finishing second in groups has sometimes been to the benefit of England. And once again here, I noticed it was similar for you as well, that I literally don't fancy England all that much. And yet I had them going to like the quarterfinals, and it was like quite a winnable quarterfinal. And that was purely because things had kind of opened up for them with their draw. And I think if they do finish top England, then they may go a little bit further than I am actually anticipating that they will go. So it's very hard to preempt. But
I think you've hit on a good point there as well, that the shocks actually tend to happen in the group stage. Like once you get to the knockout stages, like you think of the last World Cup, yeah, okay, Morocco beat Spain and Portugal, but that was like two really, really attritional games and two sides not the best. But more of the shocks tend to come in the groups where like Germany and Belgium got knocked out in the groups last time. You always had that group of death in 2014 with England, Uruguay, Italy, and Costa Rica. And Costa Rica came through that, won a very winnable last 16 tie with Greece, and then ultimately fell to the Netherlands. So I think if you can get your big boys through the groups, then it's very feasible that then they can just steamroll into a quarterfinal where we get probably 7, if not 8, of the top 10 in the market. And that's when we'll really start to try and hedge positions on outrights and things like that.
Yeah, and to be fair, it left me feeling a little bit disappointed in myself when I did my bracket. I got to the quarterfinals and I just had a load of big hitters there, and I was like, oh, is it really going to go like this? But I think the cream, you do have to be realistic. The cream does tend to rise in the majority of the cases, and like we say, the group stage jeopardy has been huge in previous tournaments. I don't think it's very high at all in this particular tournament. I think the banana skin round is going to be that round of 32. That's where we're going to get the shocks. But in the same breath, there's some teams going to be there that just aren't capable of causing a shock. So I think I'm increasingly thinking, as I do more of these research and do more of these episodes, that first knockout round is going to be the key point for bettors. I think that's where you're going to make your money. That's where your positions are either going to come to fruition or fall by the wayside. I'm increasingly thinking that's going to be the key part of the tournament from a punting perspective. We might as well just look at England's stage of elimination while I'm here. Round of 16, 7-2, quarterfinals 4-1, round of 32, 9-2, semi-finals 11-2, winner 13-2. So I think you'd be hard pressed to say there's any value lying around. It probably just compounds what we were saying, that because the draw might open up for them, even though we're not all that keen on them, they might just be able to limp through to the latter stages here in England.
Yeah, I think so. What did I have been playing like Uzbekistan in the last 32, and for all the stuff that happened in the Southgate, I don't think you can ask for a more winnable knockout tie than that. No disrespect to the Uzbekistanis, but yeah, England are one of these high variance sides for me. Like there's a very plausible chance in my head of them reaching each and every round.
Yeah.
Like you've gone playing Norway, that would be a really, really interesting last 32 tie. But I think if we were to come through that, that would set us up really well because we'd have played Croatia, who we've got history with in major tournaments and outside of major tournaments, and that would be a decent warm-up test. But I think we don't want to go into these games undercooked. I think our best like tournament performances under Southgate actually came when we had a decent test. Like playing Germany in the first knockout round at Euro 2020. I think that actually set us up then well to play even better against Ukraine and Denmark. Whereas when we limped through in 2018, I know Colombia we went through on pens, but it wasn't a great game. We were just pretty poor. I think then when we first came up against a pretty quality side in Croatia, having rotated massively against Belgium in the group, I don't know if we felt a little bit undercooked for that game. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to come through Norway, then potentially Mexico in the Azteca.
Yeah, because I mean, I've got them coming past Norway and Mexico. That's probably the tougher route. As you said, with your particular projection, you had Uzbekistan and then Mexico. So we're kind of concurring that there might be a Mexico-England last 16 game there. But either way, like as much as look, I think we're very pro England. Like I certainly am very pro England. Like I'll be cheering them with all my might, but I have my reservations about them in this particular tournament. However, I look at the Mexico, the Norway, the Uzbekistan, all the kind of potentials. And I think what England have achieved in knockout football in the last 12 to 16 years, you have to say they're all negotiable tasks with the quality that they have at their disposal. And I think it is actually quite hard to say with any confidence that England are going to get to this round and get knocked out. I can easily, I think all of those opponents would pose a challenge in a different way, maybe not Uzbekistan as much. I think that England could, on a bad day, could lose to Norway and Mexico. On a good day, would take care of them with a bit of comfort. And then in the quarterfinals as well, like you say, there's a world where they've built themselves into the tournament. They've found a way of playing. Everybody's fit and firing. There's nothing to say they couldn't. If it was a Brazil, for example, in the quarterfinal, I don't think this is a vintage Brazil crop.
That's why I've got them sneaking through that game.
And that's it. And I think that like I was the same. I think I had them actually ending up against Ecuador in the quarterfinals, and you know I've been very pro Ecuador as a view, Felix. But again, like I think if you offered England fans Ecuador in the quarterfinals, they'd snap your hand off at this particular juncture. So, like as much as we're maybe not hugely excited about England's prospects, it's easy to see why they're not much bigger in the market than what they are. They could easily find themselves in the last 8, last 4 again here. We should probably just touch on the fact that we've both ended up with different finals, albeit with strong teams. You've ended up with Spain and Portugal. Yeah, I ended up with France and Argentina, a repeat of last year's World Cup final. But look, you had France getting to the semi-finals. I had Spain and Portugal meeting earlier in the tournament, which is why I haven't got a similar outcome to you. But I think we're all very pro on the similar teams here. Like that, no one will bat an eyelid if those are the semi-finals, will they?
I don't think so. You know, you've got. I think having 4 European teams in my semi-finals has worried me a little bit, given we talked in the first episode about the climate and playing it over in the Americas.
In there
yeah, I had Argentina, Portugal in the quarters, and like that could have gone either way, and then I'd have had either of those sides probably beating England. But equally, I could see England going out to Brazil and it being a Brazil quarterfinal. I was very keen on the Spain-France side, but the other side. If you give me any 4 combinations of that second semi-final, I'd have gone, yeah, fair enough.
Sure, yeah, because I mean, you've got, you know, like with mine, I've got quarterfinals here that I actually had like a sort of, it was like a FIFA corrupt version of the bracket here, where it's like you were basically guaranteed a South American side in the semi-finals because they just kept meeting each other on my bracket. Whereas, yours was obviously, and I think we do. Probably worth mentioning actually, like with the European nations, do you think that there is just that much of a gap between the European nations and the rest? Or do you think it's just a case of we lean and gravitate towards the European nations more because we know more about them? Because
no, I do think out of like the 6 strongest sides, I'd put Argentina as the only non-European nation in there. But I think the climate's just going to be such a leveler that you can make a case for Brazil probably then Ecuador, Mexico, Colombia, Paraguay is your next set. We've spoken about Morocco. I know plenty of people are backing them. If you want to put them in that subset, you can. Again, the heat's going to play a part. We'll probably get onto like tournament specials nearer the time, but I'm very interested to see what the total goal line is going to be for a 104 game World Cup, because in my mind I can't see it being overly high scoring, and I think there are going to be some attritional. I think the last 32 could explode, and then it could get really attritional after that. I think there is a slight gap to the top 5 probably European nations off my 4 semi-finalists, and then maybe like Germany and the Netherlands, Belgium a tier below. But playing it over there with so much travel involved, I think that's a real leveler.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And like, look, as we've said various times on this video, you do the bracket, the whole bracket can change on the whim of one result. And ultimately, these predictions and forecasts of the bracket are frivolous at best, because it's not going to go like that. But I think, just to re-emphasize, what this does do is it gives you a clear feeling for maybe poor teams that might sneak into the knockout stages just by virtue of the tournament knocking out so few teams after the group stage, and they're the ones that you might want to target in these specific markets. Well, I think that about wraps us up for these stage of elimination markets. Felix, any closing thoughts that you want to add on this before we wrap up this week?
I don't think so, other than these could be quite interesting to play in play as well. I wouldn't just as soon as the first game kicks off, just discard these markets, because I think you can, after that first round of results, A, you'll get a clearer picture on the teams themselves, but B, motivation's going to be a massive thing in this, especially when if a side is guaranteed progression after 2 games, or even after the first, if Scotland come out and pump Haiti in that first game, they're very unlikely not to go through.
Yeah.
And as soon as you can see that and see maybe big teams are just going to rotate for that third game, these are very interesting markets to play in play. And there's going to be a lot of dramatic price movements. And if you can try and get ahead of those the day before a round of fixtures kicks off, then definitely start looking at those as alternates with slightly riskier but bigger payouts than just betting the match markets.
Yeah, just as we talked about Scotland there, just had a little look. Scotland round of 32 elimination, 7-4. So that another one of those angles that we've kind of talked about, where if they're going to kind of get through the group by virtue of having one of the fixtures a bye, effectively.
This is a Scotland side that's never reached the knockouts of a major tournament. I will just put it out there.
And I'll tell you what, this will be their greatest. This will be their greatest achievement if they manage to not reach the knockouts, playing Haiti in the groups. That would usurp all their previous failures. But yeah, it's anyway. Hopefully you found it interesting listening to this, and you'll go away and look at these markets and maybe find some little gems yourself. But I think what me and Felix are going to start doing now that we're up and running with this mini series, we're actually halfway through it, sadly. I'm enjoying myself so much. I was wishing it was a 12-part series. But what we're going to do is, I think, start just compiling some of our best bets, and we'll host them all on an article within the oddsnow.com website, where you could just go in and check, and we'll add to them as we're getting closer to the tournament, just so that by the time the tournament comes around, anyone who's been watching this mini-series, we've built a little bit of a portfolio, and if you want to follow along, feel free to do so. These markets are fluid, so I will mention the date that we added them and the price and what have you as well for complete clarity. But I think that'd be fun to to combine our favourite bets and then see how they fare as we go. We are planning on doing a World Cup betting vlog daily, or near daily, depending on how many people we can rope in and our sleep schedules and what have you. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting time. So please do hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to Odds Now. We're very close to 1,000 subscribers, and we'd love to have you on board for the entirety of the World Cup. It'd be great to get there before the first game. And we'll be back next week, Felix, with another deep dive into another side market, won't we? So
yes, I think is it goal scorers next week? That should be fun.
Goal scorers next week. So get in the comments and let us know who we should be looking at in these top team goal scorer, outright markets, and we'll drop any comments I mentioned in next week's pod. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again very soon here on Odds Now.
See you later.